So I think it's odd that we're still having a debate about what a citizen of the United States is. So they're debating this in Washington again. And if you look through history, the congressional records and debates, this has been going on for almost since the beginning, since the Constitution was written, and even more so around the time of the Civil War, because the Civil War was really a push to change the form of government, which could not be done because the offices that would have the power to do it, or the appearance of the power to change the form of government, didn't give those people in those offices or those offices the power to change the form of government. So they can do and say whatever they want, but without the power to do the thing that they want to do, they lack the power to do it. So in one book I read, it's described as elliptical. The act of doing something outside of the office turns the power of the office off, and so there is no power to do the act. And once they do the congressional or the constitutional acts, it turns the power back on. But then as soon as they step out of the power of that office, there is no power to act. So it's elliptical. So if we look toward the organic laws, we can see that the Articles of Confederation gave its creation, the United States, some small bits of power to do some things on a national level. Okay, all the rest of the power stayed with the states. So how is it that we have states but no state citizens? Or how is it that we have a power that goes to a national government, to which if someone wants to be a part of it, they have to contract in or get hired, yet where did they come from? They came from the states, and they go into the national government by contract or commission. They get paid. So anyone in service to the United States, working for the United States, or contracted in the military or commissioned officers or whatever, they become, for some certain purposes, national citizens. Those national citizens are citizens of the United States because they work for the agency created by the states to do national things. The rest of us are just state citizens. We're not federal and state, we're just state. Some people are federal and state, and those are the federal people because the federal people also have to comply with state law, the state that they're in. So they have a joint or a dual citizenship. They have to abide by the laws of the state, and they have to abide by the laws of the federal government. But since state people who aren't in federal government aren't on federal lands, what is it that we have to abide by that the federal government does? None, because we're civilians, we're civil. We don't bend to military law, we don't bend to the national law. It's a contract between the states and the federal government because the states created it. So when you become a federal citizen, you are contracted in and you become in service to the United States. But when you are in service to the United States, you become loyal to all the states. You have to be loyal to all the states because you're a national person. So in the very first oaths that the military and others took, they said that they would swear or affirm that they would be, although in service to the United States to do national things, they would be loyal to all the states. So they were a citizen of the state that they lived in because they had to still abide by state laws, but then they were also a national person because they had to abide by national laws, being in service to all the states, in service to the United States. So these people of the United States, they are United States citizens and also state citizens. State citizens who have no contracts with the federal government for military service are not federal citizens, they're just state citizens. The federal government has, when it comes to citizenship or relationships, has two jobs, which is to administer the national government and to protect the states. And so these people, since they're in the federal government, they have to be loyal to all the states. So their two jobs is to be in service to the United States and to be loyal to all the states. So this tells us that all the states together, the USA, created a new entity, and that new entity was called the United States. It's a national government. It has very few powers. It can do very few things. And the people that become a part of that are citizens of the United States. Okay, so Congress is required to be currently a citizen of the United States. So the members of Congress are supposed to be in military service. The president had to have had at least 14 years military service. He can be currently in or out of the military. So this was the entire situation that described Washington and how he was in service to the United States, left, and then was called back to be the president. Then after he served his time as president, in service again to the United States, he wrote in his last speech when he was leaving the presidency that he was going to return to the civil life, the quiet life, a life of leisure. He was leaving the service of the United States, and he talked about how much he's given to the United States, his time, his energy, fighting these fighting the Revolutionary Wars, these little battles all around, and how he wanted to retire and go home. And so he was writing this letter as his he wrote some letters to friends, and then he wrote his speech when he was leaving office. And this is what he contrasted between being a private citizen of the state, living a quiet life on the Potomac River, and being in service to his country as a national person. So why do we have these two situations? If you look at the Constitution and you read it, you can see a little bit of this in there, that there's two different places, and that the Constitution's constantly talking about people being citizens of the United States, being subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, but it doesn't apply to every single person in America. It doesn't apply to every single person in the States, and this is where a lot of people have problems, because they've been told so long that they are a citizen of the United States that they can't see themselves as anything but a citizen of the United States. But there are two different people. The United States gets its people from the states. And once a person of the state goes to be in service to the United States, they become protected by the United States. Okay, they're like almost dependents or property. You know, when we were called property. When my generation of people were in the military, we were called and considered property. So if someone did something to us, they would come and get us. I was telling my daughter, once she joins the military and she writes her little leave request to go on leave, and she comes home, and let's say now it's time for her to go back, and she doesn't show up back on base at the time and date she's supposed to be there, the military is going to go looking for her. They're going to call me and they're going to say, where is she? And I'm going to say, she left on such and such day at such and such time. She should have been there already. And if she's not there, they're going to go out and look for her. They're going to call all the police and all the sheriff and constables and everybody, and they're going to figure out where she went. And if they have reason, they may consider her AWOL. If they don't, they may consider her missing. So, not missing in action because maybe she's not at war, but she's active duty. I'm not really exactly sure how missing in action would work. They may just consider absent without leave. It's not always that you're voluntarily absent without leave. Sometimes you're absent without leave because you've gotten into a car accident, you're in a hospital or whatever. So she is a dual citizen. Because she would be a citizen of Texas, of the Republic of Texas, who joined the military and for military purposes became a citizen of the United States. Being a citizen of the United States, you're in service to all the states. Being in service to all the states, you're a national. As a national, you have loyalty to all the states, but you still have a duty in your state, like tax paying or whatever, having a home address. So, citizens of the United States. Now, when you are in the military and you're on a military post in, like, let's say Texas, you're still a citizen of the United States and a citizen of the state. When you come off the federal lands, you're still a federal citizen. You're still protected. If she drives from Texas to Virginia, she's still property. She's still a citizen of the United States. The United States has a duty to protect her. Now, let's say she goes onto the military lands and let's say she gets pregnant and the baby comes all of a sudden and she has it right there in her house on the federal lands. That baby is still a citizen of the state, but still a citizen of the United States because she was born on federal lands, or he was born on federal lands, whatever the case is. So there are some military posts who have military hospitals, but they can't deprive you of your state citizenship. So you're still, the dependents take on usually the citizenship of the mother. This is the ancient law, return to mother. The children always go with the mother. That's because the mother knows who her children is. Everybody can see where the child came out of. It came out of the mother. So if it comes out of the mother, we know the child is the mother's. So children always go with their mothers. That's ancient law. It goes all the way back to the very first cultures that we have writing for, the Sumerian or whatever. Sumerian, however you say it. It's return to mother. And even as an adult, if you want to return to your home country, you can do that. You're supposed to be allowed to always return to the country of your mother. Now, there may be other laws going back to the father, but from what I've read, it's always that you can return back to your mother's land or to your mother's home or whatever. This also has to do with debt and getting out of debt and not being in debt anymore. The fact that you can always go back home to your mom. I don't know if that's a sort of a hit for men who get themselves into problems and then they run back to the warm, safe bosoms of their mothers or their mother's comfort and love. I don't know if that's what that means or not, but it's kind of funny if you think about it. So if you are a federal person and you go overseas, you're still a federal person and you're still a state person. If you're overseas and you go onto a military post and you bring your dependents with you, your dependents are still citizens protected by the United States, but they don't have the same protections because they're not really considered property. And they still have their state citizenship. Now, especially during like Vietnam, the Korean War, when men went overseas to fight World War I, World II, all these different wars, these men were entangling themselves in relationships with women overseas. So they would they would marry them, or they would get them pregnant, and then the woman would claim that, this baby was the child of a military person. And then so they had to figure out the dual national citizenship for these children. And that gets into, some tall grass, so to speak. It's not really always clear, but now that we have DNA test, they can DNA test the baby, and then the baby is rightfully given its proper citizenship. If it comes back that, like, let's say the father didn't claim the child, the father claims he doesn't know the mother, and the mother's like, no, he's the father, they can do a DNA test, and then it can be determined whether or not the child is entitled to dual citizenship, the citizenship of his mother and his father. Now, sometimes these men marry these women and they have babies. Now, if they get divorced, then, does the baby go with the mother or the father? And then has to be things that figure all that out. If you have nothing to do with the military, if you're not in the military, if you've never been in the military, if you have no children with a member of the military, then all this citizenship, national citizenship, citizenship of the United States, and all this stuff doesn't even apply to you, and it doesn't even apply to your children or anybody else that you might be entangled with in a relationship or anything. If you're just a state person doing state things, you're not a federal person. Now, when we go and we look at the positive laws and the normative laws written by the United States, that are the actual laws, and the is laws and the ought to be laws, they allow people to claim to be citizen of the United States without actually being in service to the United States, but for some kind of purposes contracting to be, like, let's say a taxpayer or something. So you contract yourself in basically almost the same kind of way that a military person contracts themselves in, but the Title 26 is a normative law. So I don't know if I'm really making myself clear on this. So you have citizens of the United States the constitutional way, and then you have, and that is law, which is positive law or descriptive law, and then you have other kind of contracts that are sort of not really the way the Constitution intended, which are not positive laws. They're called normative laws or ought laws. They have no positive law citation. The court can't see them as positive laws, and this is why the IRS has its own court outside of the federal system, which it claims to be federal, which is really not. But the federal government can contract with people, so they bring people in under these just really kind of iffy situations, and they're not really clear. And, well, you volunteered yourself, so they allow people to just volunteer all their rights away and become taxpayers, for example. So this is all by contract, and that's just the way it is. So you claim to be a citizen of the United States even when you're not a citizen of the United States. But even if you are a citizen of the United States, proper, according to the exact administration, not interpretation of the federal Constitution, then you are a citizen of the United States, and you're properly contracted in. You become property of the United States. You enter military service, and you do your work, and you become a citizen of the state, and you become a citizen of the state and a national citizen representing the entire country. This is why military people are supposed to act a certain way on or off post, across the ocean in another country or here at home. It doesn't matter. You're always supposed to act a certain way. You have to wear your uniforms a certain, because you represent the United States. You represent all the states. You're a national. In service to the United States, loyal to all the states, but having also a citizenship of a state. So in the Constitution, you look at the qualifications for representative and senator, and it says that you're supposed to be a member, and you're supposed to be a citizen of the United States and not in the state wherein you reside, which tells me you're supposed to be on federal lands, and you're supposed to, even though you are still a state citizen, you're not in the state, you're on the federal lands. So to be a person of the United States, or we the people of the United States, they're talking about the military people who are currently serving. That's representatives and senators. Okay, for president, it's a little different because they used Washington as their model for writing the Constitution. So Washington got, he was in the military and became a resident of federal lands, a citizen of the United States, but then he left the military, which made him a natural born citizen, a private citizen, a citizen of just the state. But he could be called back. But if he was called back, he had to still qualify as having been at least 14 years a resident on federal lands. The justices, okay, they're a really important job, right? But they're not required to be a citizen of the United States. They're only required to have good behavior. So why is it that justices who administer the laws written by the Congress and make sure that the president are following these laws are not, they don't have anything written in there that they're supposed to be a citizen of the United States? Because the reason why is because they're administering issues between the federal government and the state. So they don't have to be nationals. They should be more just state people because they're going to look out for the state interest, and the state created the federal government. So of course, when they wrote the Constitution, they would want to make sure that the check on the power over the federal government was more favorable to the states, since the states created the federal government. And so these people, whether they had been in service in the military or are in service to the military, that at least they had good behavior. There's no qualification for a person in the Justice Department to be a citizen of the United States because they weren't required to be nationals. They weren't required to have had military service. And once you understand this, you start to understand that you are not a taxpayer if you're just a citizen of the state. You're not required to participate in all these federal programs. You're not required to sign their papers. You're not required to claim to be a citizen of the United States if you're not one. And they debate these things, I think, in Congress, and the president debates them just to confuse people. When people come across the borders, they're not supposed to get citizenship of the United States. They're supposed to get a state citizenship. Okay, once they have a state citizenship, they can, and they qualify to be a federal citizen, they can go and become a federal citizen. But the people are supposed to become state citizens and then federal citizens. So it's all been mucked up in these muddy waters, and muddy waters are really all the various opinions and writings and all this stuff. But all we need to do is go back to common sense and go back to what the federal people wanted when they wrote these constitutions and these laws. And we have to stop thinking about all the different things we believe and all the different things we've been told and all the things that we have claimed, and just start going back to, what does the document say? What do the organic laws say? What was the situation in the country when they wrote these things, when they wrote these laws? It's the states that created the federal government. It's the people of the states that created the federal government. And creating the federal government, they created a position to be a national and loyal to all the states. The United States Congress has to have military service. The president has to have 14 years military service. The justices don't. They represent the states. They're not required to be a citizen of the United States. They can be just state people, civilians. They can be federal people. They can be someone of the United States of America, as long as they have good behavior. And good behavior also includes not being a spy, not working for other countries, not doing anything that goes against the states and the state's power. The Justice Department, the Supreme Court, and the courts that are federally created are supposed to look out for the states and keep the power in the hands of the states, not the federal government. But how many justices on the Supreme Court do you think claim to be a citizen of the United States? And if they're a citizen of the United States, even now they don't have a oath anymore that requires them to be in service to the United States and loyal to the United States of America, meaning the states. They're only required to take an oath of loyalty to the United States. Okay, so go back and look at those oaths. All the timing works out, all the math works out, all the logic works out, all the good reason works out, all the common sense works out, and this is the way they administer it. The thing is that we have people in Congress lying to people who believe everything they say, and then they have a different way that they actually do things that are really truly constitutional. So the constitutional laws, the positive laws, are one set of laws that they apply constitutionally, and then they have a whole nother set of laws that are basically ought laws that use a lot of can and may and could and ought and might, these kind of words, which are normative. It's normative language, and that means they're not laws at all. So these are just basic English principles, rules of grammar. So we're claiming to be citizens of the United States using ought law and not is law, because the Constitution is completely an is does or does not document. It's not an ought and might and shall and could and may and can. There's nothing like that in the Constitution. It's you will, you won't, you can't, you shall not, you shall or you shall not. So citizen of the United States, are you really one? Do you have a constitutional contract based on a law that's been made positive, or are you signing these things that are just you volunteering yourself? I don't know. At this point, I'm just a state citizen. I'm a citizen of the Republic of Texas, which is on the law books, the current law books. The Republic of Texas still exists for all purposes, not federal, and that can be a little bit confusing, but the federal is very, very small and rarely applies to any person who's just a civilian, who's just a state person.